On Friday, I put 2 different equations on the board. Does anybody remember either one of them? Marcus. Kylie. That was one of the 2 equations that I put on the board. Do you remember what M and B represent in terms of this equation? Brian. M is slope. And what is B? You're right, the Y-intercept. Very good. The slope is how much it is going to change, or the rate at which it's changing. And the Y-intercept is kind of like a starting point. It's where it's going to cross the Y-axis. And I don't want people to get confused with the fact that it means that it's a starting point of a line necessarily. Lines are infinite in length, so if a line is going like this, that Y-intercept is where it's crossing the Y-axis. And the reason I say it's where we start, because in the real world, that's what it is. If you go bowling, that's a linear relationship. It's so much per game, right? So much per person, right? The only thing is there's usually a fee that you pay up front. What is that for? Okay. Okay. Listen, the shoes, the cost of the shoes is this B. It's that starting point. It's the initial cost. And then everything else is changing at a steady rate. Lots of things exist in the real world that are that way. If you come out and have somebody look at work in your house, a lot of places charge $25 for a service call, $25 an hour. So for the first hour, how much are you paying? $50. $25 for the service call, $25 for the first hour. And it's $25 per hour after that. So the longer they stay, the less overall it costs you per hour, so to speak, if you divided that service call fee into it. So B is that starting point. The other formula that I put on the board dealt with M. This one's been on the board quite a few times. What's the slope formula?
Y2 minus Y1 over X2
Okay. Y2 minus Y1 over X2 minus X1. If you do not have these 2 formulas memorized, you need to memorize them. Everything in Module 12 and in Module 13 is based off of these 2 formulas. Now, even today, the book hasn't introduced this yet. I've given it to you ahead of the book. I want you to understand the importance of this equation because, I mean, it's just used in so many different places. On page 365, it says the graph of a non-vertical line crosses the y-axis. The y-intercept is the y-coordinate of the point where the graph intersects the y-axis. So let's look at this. What is the y-intercept on this graph? No, it's the y value. So it's not 0, 4, it's just what? It's just 4. The y-intercept, or the b value, is 4. It says find the slope using these 2 points. If these are my 2 points, then I'm going to let this be x1, y1, and this be x2 and y2. So it says y2, 6, minus y1, 4. 6 minus 4. over x2, negative 3, minus x1, 0. What is 6 minus 4? 2. Negative 3 minus 0. So the slope of this line is a negative 2/3. In step 2, it says the line also contains these additional points, and it says find the slope using these other points. What do you think is going to be the case when I go to find the slope using other points? It's going to be the same, right? The slope of this line isn't changing. It should be what? The same all the way throughout, no matter which points I use. So we're just going to check it. I'm going to let this be x1, y1, and this be x2 and y2. So I'm going to take 4 minus 0 over 0 minus 6. 4 minus 0 is 4. 0 minus 6 is a negative 6. And what would this simplify to? Negative 2/3. So I can see that it's the same. Likewise, if I go to the next ordered pair and I do it, I'm just going to start here. This is y2, 0, minus y1, 6, x2, which is 6, x1, which is a negative 3, so minus a negative 3. 0 minus 6, negative 6. 6 minus a negative 3, 9. And what does this simplify to? Negative 2 over 3. It says compare the answers you got in step 1 and 2 with the equation of the line that you graphed. So they're saying compare it to this. What do you notice? That the value in front of x is what? The slope. Which I've already shown you that by showing you y equals mx plus b, correct? Everybody see it? They're trying to make you get this connection. That you can calculate the slope here, but that slope is in the equation as well. And that works both ways. If they give you a line, you could figure out what an equation looks like. Or if they give you an equation, you can figure out what the line would look like. The next thing it said was find the value of y when x is 0. Well, this is where x is 0. And what's the value of y? 4, which we already said. And I'm going to write it down as b equals 4, the y-intercept. And it says compare your answer in step 3 to the equation of the line. What did we notice? That it's there. That this is b. In other words, we get to see that we have this form y equals mx plus b. Everybody see it? See the connection between them? Everybody good with the first example? Turn to page 366. They asked me to find two things. M and B, the y-intercept. How do I find slope? Y2 minus y1. 32 minus 22. x2 minus x1. 4 minus 2. 32 minus 22 is? 4 minus 2 is? So the slope of this line is 5. How do I find the y-intercept if they've given me a table and I don't have a graph to look at? Marcus? I could do that, but it's easier than that.
It looks proportional to me, so it has to the origin.
It's not. 22 divided by 2 would be 11. 32 divided by 4 is not 11. So it's definitely not proportional. Well, let's go back here and look at what it says the y-intercept is. It says the y-intercept is where the x-coordinate would be what? 0, right? Well, what if x was 0? You're right, David. How? How do you know? Look at the pattern. To get from 4 to 2, I took away what? If I go from 2 to 0, I took away what? From 32 to 22, I took away. So to get to the 0, I'd have to also take away what? 10. So this would be 12. Everybody okay with where that is? Everybody understand how I got it? So, on number 2, the slope would be 15 minus 8 over 2 minus 1. Or 7 over 1, which is 7. So the slope is 7. What do we know about the y-intercept? What is x? X had to be 0. So if I took 1 away and I took 1 away, if I took 7 away, what do I got to take away here? 7. And what's the y-intercept? 1. Everybody okay with 1 and 2 that are there? Now I want you to look at page 368. If you're looking at a graph, which one's easier to find, the slope or the y-intercept? The y-intercept, because it is where it's going to cross that y-axis. And what is the y-intercept in this case? 1. I can look at it and I can clearly identify that it's that y value where it's crossing the y-intercept. Okay. When I have two ordered pairs on a graph like this, probably one of the biggest questions that I get as a teacher is which order do I need to write them down in? And does it matter? And the answer is, it doesn't matter. But very generically, you should be able to tell me something about the slope of this line, and it's a good idea to look at the generic part of it. What can somebody tell me about the slope of this line, generically? Okay, but that's not the slope. You're right, it's not proportional. The line isn't. Can anybody tell me something about the line, just in a generic sense? Marcus? Very good. It's forcing me downhill. The slope is going to be negative. And it's a good idea to look at that, because if there's one mistake that's made, people drop signs all the time. and you should look to see, hey, does this answer make sense or not? So, again, if I did y2 minus y1, this would be a negative 3 minus 1 over 2 minus 0. Negative 3 minus 1 more would be a negative 4 over 2, which would be a negative 2. When I come to the next way of doing it, it would say 1 minus a negative 3 over 0 minus 2. 1 minus a negative 3 became 4, but 0 minus 2 became a negative 2. So when I do it, I still get what as an answer? Negative 2. Did it matter which way I wrote the ordered pairs down? No, makes no difference. Pretty good? Then that's your assignment. Negative 2.